It's time for the one and only, the premier, the only official podcast of Pro Rodeo. Your Chute bosses are ready, so let's give it a go and talk some rodeo.
We're back and it's time for another episode of the Chute Bosses, the official podcast of Pro Rodeo. Tanner Bar, Tracy Rink will be here with you every episode. We're your Pro Rodeo insiders, or at least we try to act like we know what we're talking about, Tracy. There may be some people out there that don't quite believe us, but we're putting on a pretty good show nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at the PRCA a decade, you've been a couple years, and we enjoy the sport. We want to share the information that we can to the viewers and listeners.
And we got a great podcast coming your way here on the Chute Bosses. We're going to sit down with Ethan Wayne. If that name rings a bell, son of John Wayne, Tracy, not a guest you get every day.
Yeah, I mean, we got hooked up with him through some channels, and I'm sure he's got some interesting stories to tell. I mean, being the son of John Wayne, I mean, enough said there.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get there, we got a lot of information coming your way. We start with our PRCA Pro Rodeo props. And Tracy, today our prop, I guess it's a pretty easy one here as the Pro Rodeo season starts to wind down. We're going with the state of South Dakota because what they've done within the last year to promote the sport of rodeo and to put on an event like they're going to put on or like we're going to go to there in Sioux Falls, they deserve a lot of props.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the Governor's Cup. It's at the year-end event, the last weekend. $1.1 million is available. I mean, someone's going to walk away there and probably win $30,000 on the last day of the season.
Yeah.
I mean, we've never, not since I've been here, that we've had that kind of purse available on the last day of the season. I mean, we've had stuff, obviously the September rush and guys on the bubble winning money, but not that kind of money. I got to go to Sioux Falls last year when they announced it. It's a beautiful facility, the Denny Sanford Arena. I mean, and they want us there. We want to be there. I mean, it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and like you said, in journalism, we're both writers. We're both, journalism and media personalities. A rewrite. We could have a big rewrite on the last day of the season where, somebody flips the script and makes the NFR from. I wouldn't be surprised, Tracy, we don't have somebody that's outside the top 20 make it into the Wrangler NFR.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, because, I mean...
On the last weekend of the season.
Or, essentially the last day, because it's going to pay out. So, I mean, yeah, I could see guys... I could probably see at least 2 or 3 guys that you never thought would get in and go there and have a great experience at the Cinch playoffs there and get in. And it's kind of like a version of the NASCAR playoffs. I mean, you have a guy can come in from the back, and all of a sudden he's going to win it all, but this doesn't win it all. But to them it is, because to get into the NFR is your ultimate goal.
Yeah, and it should be a ton of fun. That's coming up September 28th through the 30th, Sioux Falls, Denny Sanford Center. Don't want to miss the action. It's time to get into our short round, Tracy, and we know as the Pro Rodeo season starts to come to an end, we are going to have awards out the wazoo, whether that's Bucking Horse of the Year, whether it's NFR, NFSR, NFBR personnel. There's a lot of awards coming our way here on Pro Rodeo, and one kind of final month here to decide who maybe takes home those awards if somebody makes a late season push.
Yeah, I mean, and to be nominated is an honor in itself. Because you're in the top 3 usually, unless there's ties, and I mean, that's part of the goal, but winning it, I mean, it means a lot to those stock contractors. It means a lot for stock contract personnel to get chosen to work events. I mean, they're on pins and needles, and they want it out there. They want to tell their friends. And when you rodeo, you want to be a part of the big national events, whether it's the NFR Open and the NFSR, or whether it's obviously the ultimate is the National Finals Rodeo. And, yeah, like you said, we probably have 2 weeks of straight announcing results. It's just nonstop, but it's great. It's great for the people involved in rodeo, and we want to disperse that information.
Yeah, and it's cool for us too to get to see who the rodeo committee thinks or community thinks, who the best of the best is, and then some of those awards will be announced a little bit later on at the awards banquet in Las Vegas. And another one we had is the AQHA Horse of the Second Quarter, Tracy. This is a gentleman whose horse has just been dynamite in the sport of pro rodeo, and we congratulate him. It's quite the honor to win the AQHA Horse of the Quarter.
Yeah, Ryan Moats, and his horse is Rocky. And, I mean, Moats has done very well off and on in his career. I mean, he's been to the NFR multiple times. But, I mean, you got a horse nominated. Anthony Lucian nominated him. And we want to promote that award because the announcers get money just for nominating a person. And then, obviously, if the person wins, then it means even more. But Moats is a great guy. And it just tells you, when I spoke to they love talking about their horses. I mean,
most of the time they'd rather talk about their horses than them.
That's their ATM. If you got a good horse, you're going to win rodeos, and they know that. They're obviously very intelligent cowboys, knowing that their horsepower is.
Were you going to say they're not dumb?
Yes. So I mean, it was great to talk to Ryan, and we had Tryon win the first one. So I mean, they go in and we're helping promote this, and we want the Cowboys to get involved. We want this to make a bigger deal, and obviously the Horse of the Year awards are going to come up, so maybe those guys are in the mix for that as well.
Yep. So if you got a nomination out there, you see a great cowboy or a pickup man, even for that matter, doing something great, you can go out and nominate them for the AQHA Horse of the Quarter or the Horse of the Year. And going to lead us into our 8 questions segment. We sit down with somebody that's impacted the sport of rodeo, Tracy, in a wide variety. It's the Cinch playoffs general manager, Rorey Lemmel. And, we already gave the state of South Dakota props, but also got to give a guy like Rorey props because he decided, let's spearhead this thing, let's do it, let's bring, one of the most exciting events in rodeo to Sioux Falls.
Yeah, he's instrumental in it. Obviously, he was the one pushing the gears to get an event like this. I mean, he knew that opportunity was available, I'm sure, with hours and hours and days of hard work. And he's a former competitor himself. Like, he knows the sport. He's well aware of what an event like this means to South Dakota. I mean, it's a storied rodeo history in the state. This is the richest rodeo in the history of South Dakota.
Yeah.
I mean, just digest that for a minute. So we can't thank Rorey enough for, helping the PRCA, obviously helping the state of South Dakota. So we're glad that he got involved to do something like this.
Here's 8 questions with Rorey Lemmel.
What the Cinch playoffs is, obviously at the end of the season right there in September in Sioux Falls.
Well, it's professional rodeo's first ever playoffs. So when we take the top 24 to Puyallup, Washington in the wild card round, the top 4 from there will move on to Sioux Falls, and the next 8 in our tour standings, which is comprised of the 60 biggest rodeos in professional rodeo. We narrow the field to 12. All 12 of them guys will go 2 days, Thursday and Friday. Saturday we narrow it to 8, and then a 4-man round. And somebody can win $40,000 if they sweep the field in Sioux Falls. So it's a huge game changer.
And you speak about game changer, the $1 million payout at South Dakota's biggest rodeo in the history of the storied state of South Dakota. What's that mean to you guys to host it at the Denny Sanford Center and to have an event like this?
Well, it's $1.1 million, and we plan on growing it every year. And for South Dakota, that's their state sport. And when you talk about names like Clint Johnson and Casey Tibbs and Chad Furley, and it just goes on and on, the world champions, Lisa Lockhart, and it just keeps rolling. It's everything to our state. We have no other professional sports. This is us. We're rodeo.
Talk to people. I mean, the complex was new to me in the arena, but the Denny Sanford complex is state of the art. Like, what are people going to see when they see that rodeo there in Sioux Falls?
So when we get to Sioux Falls, we'll have everything set up close to the dimensions of Thomas and Mack. Prefert's bringing an arena up. We'll set it up so you are right on top of the action. There's not a finer building that you're going to look at playing. So when you bring the best athletes, the best animals, and you're right on top of the action, we want to mimic the National Finals Rodeo. That's our Super Bowl. That's what it's going to look like in Sioux Falls.
Farm life means always hoping for the best, but planning for uncertainty. You have to be ready for the next everything, the next dawn, the next season, the next harvest, the next technology, the next challenge, and the next generation. No matter what comes your way, we can help keep you ready for the next.
Transferring into our next segment, Tracy, and this is our Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame Spotlight. We've already done a couple of great cowboys, and we got a couple more great ones coming your way. We're never going to run out of people to spotlight. We know you're a big fan of this sport. We know that you've been covering it for many years now in the sport of rodeo, but you also really love this event. Event that sometimes gets overshadowed by stuff in Las Vegas. Who's your Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame Spotlight?
Well, it's Guy Allen, the legend. His nickname's the legend. I mean, come on. He's won 18
Start calling you the legend.
I'm not Guy Allen. I know that. He's won 18 gold buckles in steer roping. I mean, no one in the history of the PRCA has won that many
in a single
event championships. And essentially, when you were going there, you were there to finish second because he was so good. He's from New Mexico. He lived in Lovington. I used to live in Hobbs. That's the first time I met him in 1993.
That's awesome.
So it's been a while, but Guy Allen, I mean, you'll never see a better steer roper than Guy Allen, and give him credit. I mean, he still does some things now. He made the NFSR in 2016. He made a comeback and still was competitive. So, I mean, it's just incredible what Guy Allen's done for the sport, and there'll never be another steer roper as good as him, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely worthy of a spotlight in our Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame spotlight. And our Did You Know segment, this one's going to be a little bit interesting. We're going back to the year 1959. Jim Shoulders, Pro Rodeo Hall of Famer himself, won his final 2 of 16 titles at the NFR, and also in that same year, it was the last of 6 for Casey Tibbs. So talk about 1959, Tracy, and just a year in history in the sport of rodeo. 2 legends going out at a very similar time, or starting to slow down at a very similar time.
Right, and that was the inaugural NFR in 1959. Yep. So I mean, you had 2 legends in the sport. I mean, anybody who knows anything about rodeo knows Jim Shoulders and Casey Tibbs. I mean, I'm sure no one thought anybody would win more than 16 world championships. Obviously, Trevor Brazil has at 26, and Casey Tibbs. I mean, another South Dakota guy. Like he's a legend. And it's just ironic that both those 2 guys in that historic event would go out with their last championship. It's almost like a fitting way to introduce the NFR to the public with these 2. It's like it's like a famous thing like Elvis or someone like you always
has exited the building.
Elvis has exited the building, and they did with their final 2 championships.
Yeah, so 1959, quite the year in our Did You Know segment. Our viewer question this week comes from we don't really have a name here, Tracy, but it just says a true fan of the sport of rodeo. They want to know what's the highest paying rodeo inside the playoff series. This is something that, we don't have the numbers for this season yet because the season hasn't totally concluded. So we did have to search this one. I mean, off the top of our head, we both, listed off rodeos like Calgary, like Houston, like San Antonio, those level of rodeos. Cheyenne, throw that in the mix. But the highest paying rodeo going back to 2022, $2 million, Tracy, Rodeo Houston. That's quite the show they put down there at NRG Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, it's an event for like a month.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
And the crowds they get, the acts they get, the country acts.
The money our Cowboys get.
And the money the Cowboys get. I mean, it's life-changing money. If you win down there, it's $50,000. I mean,
almost punch your ticket to the NFR.
Yeah, almost every single guy, because they obviously, Rodeo Houston was a part of us for a long time, meaning us, the PRCA. Then they were away, and then they came back a few years back. And when you win that, it's like 90% chance, or if even not higher, that you're going to the NFR. I mean, 50,000. I mean,
that'd be something good to look into, is how many people, that win Houston end up making the NFR. I'm sure it is 90-95%.
Because the only way that you'd fall out is if you got hurt soon after and you had to miss an extended period.
Or if you didn't win anything the rest of the season, those type of things.
But usually the guys that win are guys that are going to have great seasons. I mean, Sage Newman's won it back-to-back years.
Yeah.
Who set the single-season bareback record in
Saddlebronc record last year.
Saddlebronc. Sage Newman.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you went in Riley Webb. $50,000. Like guys that win that kind of money, not only you set yourself up for the NFR, you set yourself up to big single season records.
So we appreciate all of our viewers sending in questions, and we encourage you to send in more questions to all the PRCA social media channels: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. You send it in, we'll try and get it here on the Chute Bosses podcast. Before we get ready to send it to break, we're sending it down to our friend, our esteemed colleague, our like 4th or 5th cousin. I don't know what he is. It's Buck. He's down in the Hall of Fame. He has your Pro Rodeo word of the day.
I'm Buck, official correspondent of the PRCA podcast, standing here by the all-around champions. I was never considered an all-around champion. I consider myself the people's champion. The word for the day is hung up, as in if I'm at the club and I call the ladies the next day, they hung up on me. But if you're a rough stock rider, you get hung up. It doesn't end well, you get hung up.
Horses are one of nature's greatest gifts, which is why they deserve the very best that nature has to offer.
Since we've started using hemp flavoring, our horses are calmer, more willing, more athletic.
In the daily pellet, they eat it in their feed. My horses are picky. For them to eat it says something. the stuff's really just been lightning in the bottle.
Equine Hemp Solutions. We support your horse so you can support your lifestyle. Proud supporter of your Western Sports Association. Go to the Equine Solutions website below and use Cowboy10 and receive 10% off your order.
Good to hear from Buck down in the Hall of Fame with a special word of the day. And it's time for our special guest of the day here on the Chute Bosses. It's Ethan Wayne joining us here this afternoon for another episode and another great interview. Ethan, thanks for being here with us. It's great to have you here on the Chute Bosses.
Thanks for having me.
We all know, you might recognize the last name there, Tracy, a guy that's pretty well known in a family that's pretty well known in the Western way of life.
Yeah, I mean, obviously John Wayne and then Ethan's tied into all this. I guess first off, Ethan, what was the experience like being on the set of all the movies? You know, John Wayne's probably the most legendary actor cowboy, if not the most legendary cowboy of all time. What was it like growing up in that environment and being on all those movie sets?
You know, looking back, it's like, for me, I don't know if I could ever get that same feeling, like the excitement, the adventure, you know, the smell of the horses and the livestock and the leather, and you know, my dad chewing tobacco, and you know, up before dawn and home after dark. I don't know, it was when I think back on it, it's a pretty idyllic time period, adventure, experience, all those things rolled into one. You know, I've said it a number of times now, but really I think, you know, you absorb things from your parents, their feelings and things. And I think the years that I was around, I think he was much more at ease and much more relaxed and happy, either making a film, you know, being on location, working on that project, or being on the boat, exploring with friends and having a good time than he was really at home. I felt like in that period of his life, he had to deal with a lot of administration, and maybe some relationship issues and, you know, business things. So for sure, like, and again, you're hearing from somebody who's 61 now, you know, and so I'm remembering from, you know, 8 to 17. So you're getting maybe, you know, 10 years of memory, a child's memory. But the locations were, I don't know how you replicate an experience like that. You got a troop of people who are all good at what they do, project focused, in an outdoor environment, remote, and it was just idyllic. I constantly search for places that take me back to that feeling of it's not small town, it's rural, and it's adventure, and it's hard work, you know. At the same time, you know, they were craftsmen. Like, he wasn't new at his job. So you got to see like a master at work and then apprentices. And so, you know, whether it was him or a cinematographer or a director, you know, you could see in real time, like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. That guy before, not so much. Like, you know, you could tell who were the sharpshooters in those situations. And in it, as a kid, it made me want to get good at things. So yeah, interesting time.
Yeah, Ethan, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but it seemed like you guys, you know, just being around that, your family, you know, the entire, you know, show when John was doing his thing, that you guys truly cared about the Western way of life, and it came through in those movies and in those shows.
And, you know, again, another odd thing for me was I grew up at the beach, right? Right after I was born, my father moved down from the San Fernando Valley to Newport Beach, which was a small beach town in the 60s. And he had just bought this big converted World War II minesweeper called the Wild Goose. And that's where we spent a lot of, you know, really all our free time was on that boat. So it was funny to go from, you know, life at the beach and around boats to then, you know, a Western location where, you know, there's horses and dogs and cattle and all kinds of livestock. And as a kid, you know, I did have months of the year where I was living that Western lifestyle. And then boom, it switched to the beach, and I didn't see a horse for months again. And I never thought of it at the time, but I think about it now. At home, there was no, we didn't have horses. I remember they'd take me to show Western horses, and we'd drive maybe 45 minutes from the house out to this place called Coto de Casa, which is now a big suburban housing development. But at the time, it was skeet shooting and horse stables. And that's all that was there. And so I would get a little bit, but it was kind of randomly thrown in. And either I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, or nobody really told me, like, you're going to be a cowboy now for 3 months, or you're going to live on a boat for 3 months. He just kind of, like, I take my dog with me everywhere. He just kind of took me as a kid everywhere. We didn't ask any questions. We just went.
And Ethan, I know, staying on similar topic, you run the John Wayne Enterprises. You have the stuff in Fort Worth. Can you talk about, I guess, first off, what you have in Fort Worth for people to see involving your family and the legacy?
Yeah. The Fort Worth Stockyards is undergoing a little bit of a revitalization. And we'd done a pop-up and put some display of my dad's memorabilia up at the South Point during the NFR, just to see if people were interested in it. And there was a lot of interest there. And so Patrick Gotch from the Cowboy Channel brought a guy named Craig Cavalier over. Craig's redoing the stockyards, and they said, if you're ever looking for a permanent home, this might be a great choice for you. Come down and look at it. We went down there. Craig showed us his big plan, and we loved it. And we've got a home down there in the stockyards now. We've got about 12 or 14,000 square feet. A beautifully designed exhibit that takes you from, my father's birth all the way through his life, professional, personal, family, recreation. We touch on the boating. We show you the ranching that he was involved in. He grew a lot of cotton, and he raised a lot of beef cattle, and he raised prized Hereford bulls, registered Hereford bulls. So it's a place we can display a lot of the memorabilia that has been, hidden for the last 40 years, and share the story of John Wayne with people who might not know it.
Ethan, one of the things I have to ask is, we know you did a little acting in your career as well. Do you ever get on the back of a horse? Is this still happening for you to this day, or has it been a while?
Since I've been on a horse?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a little while. We did a podcast, so we went up and got on horseback, and I don't think we had the greatest horses. They were a little, they were a little rough, but we hung in there. We lost one guest, but she got back on, and we had a good time. But, when you get there in that environment, you miss it. Just everything about it. If it's part of your life when you're a kid, the minute you get back there and you feel the movement, or you get the smell, it takes you back. When I first went back to the stockyards with Patrick Gotch, there wasn't much available there. I'm sorry for the noise, but just finished training here. He walked me up the hill to a place called Horseshoe Hill in the stockyards, a chicken fried steak place. We walked up there, we sat down, I didn't think anything of it. I took one bite of chicken fried steak, and I was transported back to my childhood, because when my dad and I were alone, that's one thing that we would make together is chicken fried steak. And I'd forgotten about it. It's been a long time. And so the same thing happens around horses. You smell it, you get the sensation, and it transports you back to a different time and place. And for me, it transports me back to a place, with my dad. And I lost him when I was 17. So, like, the special moments that I had with him were really on the boat or on location when he'd get a break, and we'd both jump on a horse and we'd go for a little, 15-minute trail ride together and have father and son conversations. It was pretty fun.
And if I'm correct here, you were in Big Jake, right? That's the one movie you were in with your dad?
Yeah. I was little Jake in the movie called Big Jake. And, it was so, most of the time on location, I had to stay away from everything. Don't get in somebody's sight line. Don't make any noise. Don't step on the cables. All the junk that, I wanted to do as a kid. I wasn't allowed to do. But when I got to be on Big Jake, I got to be involved. So I got to be there. I got to be in the conversations. I got to be, in front of the camera. And although I really just sort of showed up and did what my father told me to do, it was a little bit different experience for me. And I felt even more camaraderie and even more a part of the team than I had on other film shoots, to be able to be a part of that. And now, as as I'm getting on in years, I can go back and look at me and my dad together and my brother, and just remember fondly. And when you see it, it's different. Like, you see it and you go, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. It just takes you back.
Well, Ethan, we appreciate having you on here. It's been great to have the chance to talk with you and, hear about your life and the impact that, your father had and you as well and your family continues to have on the Western way of life. So we really appreciate it.
I'll tell you that, the Western lifestyle, especially for kids, is, it's like a merit-based system, right? You get more responsibility when you handle the responsibility that you've been given. And I think that's so important for our country, that rural upbringing. But it's not rural, wherever you are, wherever the kids, whether it's on a boat, wherever the kids get responsibility, and they have to have situational awareness, and they have to pay attention, and they have to listen, and they have to get used to listening before they open their mouth. But you start taking care of the animals, and then you start, putting some of the gear on the animals, and then you can ride the animal. The same thing in a boat. You start with a little rowboat, and then maybe you master that where you can handle it and take your friends on it. Then maybe you get a little motor, and then maybe you get one with a steering. It goes on from there. And I think that's so important for kids. And man, to be able to have experienced that Western lifestyle, nautical lifestyle, filmmaking, which is serious business. Every hour in a film set costs a tremendous amount of money. So people are focused and they're good at their jobs and they're not messing around. And to get that kind of input as a young person, it's, I treasure it. It's invaluable.
Well, we appreciate you joining us on here. Tracy, any last words here for Ethan?
Well, I just appreciate it. I mean, to be able to take us down memory lane that way and join us in our, our podcast here at the PRCA, it means a lot to us, and we thank you.
Well, we'll have to get Patrick on. He was busy today, had a prior obligation, but he'd love to get on the show, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Doubt about it. Tracy, great to have Ethan Wayne on here, from a legendary family, and, they just continue to do great things in our industry, and we couldn't thank them enough.
No, I mean, John Wayne is John Wayne. I mean, there's no other person like John Wayne. So to have a family tie like this and be able to get connected with Ethan and hopefully his brother in the future, it means a lot to the PRCA, and hopefully our viewers will appreciate it.
No doubt about it. We'll continue to have great interviews coming your way here on the Chute Bosses, but that's going to do it for now. Stay safe out there and keep on rodeoing.